The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks across the dusty grounds of the county auction yard, catching on bits of straw and rusted metal fencing. An uneasy hush hung in the air, pierced only by the occasional whinny or distant bark of a dog. The usual crowd had gathered, ranchers, traders, and hopeful bidders, but the buzz today wasn't about price or pedigree. It was about the horse. They called him Diablo. He stood alone in the final holding pen, nostrils flared and muscles twitching beneath the coat, so black it looked almost blue in the sunlight. Several men had already tried to get near him, only to be met with bared teeth, rearing hooves, or a wild scream that didn't sound like it belonged to any tamed creature. Diablo had never been ridden, never been haltered, and more than one cowboy bore the bruises to prove it. He wasn't just wild, he was angry. Behind the rusted rail, a group of ranch hands murmured, watching the beast toss his head violently, eyes rolling with distrust. "He's untouchable," one of them muttered, chewing on a toothpick. "Damn thing's got the devil in him." "That old man better not try anything," another said, nodding toward the figure shuffling through the crowd. Eli Turner didn't look like he belonged there. His boots were worn thin, the creases on his coat stitched with time, and his face, lined and weather-beaten, held no expression but quiet observation. He walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg, and carried a simple walking stick made from a crooked piece of cedar. No one could remember seeing him at the auctions in recent years, and yet here he was. Some people recognized him. Others weren't sure if he was a myth. 20 years ago, Eli Turner had been the best horseman in 3 states, the man who whispered to colts and calmed broken stallions. But after a tragic accident on his ranch, one that claimed the life of his only son, he'd vanished. They said he sold off his land, let his horses go, and disappeared into the mountains. Some believed he died up there. Most never asked. Eli's gaze locked onto Diablo, and for a moment, the crowd seemed to fade away. His fingers curled slightly around the cedar stick, not out of fear, but out of memory. Something in the way that horse moved, raw coiled, like a wound that never healed, felt all too familiar. The auctioneer, a boisterous man with a cowboy hat too big for his head, stepped up to the platform. He tapped the microphone, and a scratchy feedback squeal caused the nearest horses to rear. "All right, folks, we've got a real special one to finish the day," he shouted, eyes darting nervously toward the pen. "Now, Diablo here. Well, he ain't your typical ranch horse, but for the brave soul who thinks they've got what it takes, this one comes at a steal." Laughter rolled through the crowd. No one moved. No one dared. "Do I hear 100? Come on. Someone give me 100 for the devil horse." A few chuckles. A sarcastic, "I'll pay 100 to not own him." Then silence again, until Eli raised his hand. A hush fell over the yard. The auctioneer blinked, leaned forward, squinting into the crowd. "Sir, you placing a bid?" Eli nodded once. 100. You understand what you're buying, old man." Eli didn't answer. He simply stepped forward, closer to the pen, never once breaking eye contact with Diablo. The stallion snorted, reared slightly, then froze. It was subtle, just a flicker, but something shifted. The other horses had bolted or turned when he acted that way. Eli didn't. The auctioneer, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "Well, all right then. 100 going once." 200. Someone blurted from the left side. Heads turned. 3. Another shouted from behind a truck. Suddenly, the energy changed. Not because they wanted the horse, but because they didn't want to be shown up by a limping relic of the past. Eli's jaw tightened. 500. Gasps followed. The crowd now waited with breath held. "Sold," the auctioneer cried, gavel slamming down. "To the gentleman with the cane." Some clapped. Most stared in disbelief. Eli didn't acknowledge either. He simply turned to the stable hand at the gate and gestured. "Open it." "Sir, that's—" The young man hesitated. "That's not safe." "Do it." Reluctantly, the latch was pulled. The gate creaked open. Diablo didn't charge. He didn't bolt. He stood there, wild eyes fixed on the man who dared walk toward him. Muscles coiled. Breath steamed from his flared nostrils. The crowd braced for the storm. But Eli didn't move like a man looking for a fight. He moved like someone approaching an old memory. Each step was careful, grounded, yet without fear. He paused just a few feet away, planting his cane into the dirt, then slowly, deliberately, removed his worn leather hat. "You're not angry," he said softly. "You're afraid." Diablo pawed the ground, ears twitching. "I've seen those eyes before. In the mirror. After the war. After the fire. After my boy." He didn't raise his voice, didn't reach for the horse. He just stood there, heart open, speaking truths that weren't meant for anyone else. "You think pain makes you untouchable. It don't. It just means no one tried the right way." The crowd leaned in, silent now. Diablo let out a long breath, a sound somewhere between a sigh and a snort. And then, astonishingly, he stepped forward. Not much, but enough. Eli didn't flinch. "That's it," he murmured. "One step. Another. Then another." The horse was close enough to strike now. But he didn't. He lowered his head, trembling with some unseen emotion, as if confused by his own surrender. And then, without permission or prompting, Diablo touched his nose to Eli's chest. The crowd erupted in stunned murmurs. "He's letting him. I don't believe it." Eli's hand hovered over the stallion's mane, not touching, just hovering. "You come with me," he whispered. "We'll both figure it out." Later, papers were signed, and the horse was loaded into an old trailer hitched to a rusted blue pickup that had no business still running. As the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of fire and gold, Eli Turner drove away with the horse no one could tame. But what lingered wasn't just the image of Diablo calm inside that trailer. It was the feeling he left behind, a question that hung heavy in every onlooker's chest. Who was that man, and how in God's name did he do that? No one had an answer, but something told them this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The tires of Eli's old pickup crunched down the gravel road as dusk settled over the valley, a curtain of lavender light descending behind the ridges. Diablo shifted in the trailer, hooves thudding occasionally against the metal floor, but there was no wild thrashing, no panic bucking, just restless wait, as if the stallion was confused by the silence, by the lack of a fight. Eli's hands gripped the wheel loosely, his eyes watching the road as it narrowed through a thicket of pine. The last remnants of civilization faded behind him. No lights, no power lines, no signs. Just the rising hum of cicadas and the smell of old sap and rain-damp earth. He hadn't brought anyone out here in years. Not since Sam. The gravel ended at a rusted gate that creaked like an old door in a forgotten house. Eli climbed down, favoring his left leg, and opened it slowly, the hinges groaning in protest. The pasture stretched beyond, untamed but not wild, tall grass bent by the breeze, and an old barn hunched at the edge of the clearing like a memory trying not to be remembered. He backed the trailer into the paddock, unlatched the door, and stood to the side. Diablo didn't leap out. He walked, cautious, alert, but without the violent energy that had made him a legend at the auction yard. He stepped onto the grass like a creature remembering the earth beneath its feet, snorted once, then tossed his head toward Eli. Eli watched him for a long moment, then gave a short nod. "You'll stay out here tonight. Get a feel for it." He turned and limped toward the barn, where he lit a single lantern and set it beside the workbench. Dust motes danced in the yellow glow. The tools were still there, rasps, brushes, hoof picks, all coated in rust and time. Blankets hung like forgotten skins. In the corner, a photo nailed to the beam had turned sepia with age. A boy with wild hair grinned beside a younger version of Eli, one hand clutched tight around a filly's lead. He didn't look at it long. The night passed in pieces, snatches of wind, the rustle of Diablo moving through grass, and the creak of the barn's frame settling into itself like an old man stretching his bones. Eli didn't sleep much. He lay on a cot in the loft, boots still on, hand resting on the cedar, cane beside him. By dawn, he was already outside. Diablo stood near the fence, eyes fixed on the barn, ears twitching at every sound. Eli approached slowly, holding nothing in his hands. No halter, no rope, just presence. The stallion watched, unblinking. Eli stopped a few feet away. "Not gonna force you." He sank down onto a stump, let out a breath, and stayed quiet. The minutes passed. A bird chirped. A breeze stirred the grass. And then Diablo stepped closer. No sudden movements. No warnings. He just came, slow and deliberate, until his shadow stretched across Eli's boots. His breath was warm and moist, and Eli could feel it on his skin. Still, he didn't move. Finally, he spoke. "You got eyes like Sam's horse. Kestrel. That mare didn't trust a soul after she was broke wrong. Sam worked every day. Gentle hands, soft voice, just like I taught him. She came around. Took time. Took patience." Diablo flicked his ears forward. Eli's voice cracked just a little. "That was the last horse Sam ever trained. He was 16. We'd been out in the west pasture. Old fencing gave way, and that bull charged. He shoved me clear. Took the hit." The stallion didn't move, but Eli saw something in him shift. A flicker of understanding, or maybe just recognition of pain. "I quit everything after that," Eli said quietly. "Sold the place. Lived like a ghost." He finally lifted his eyes to meet Diablo's. "Then I saw you. Back there. You look like I felt. Mad at the world for surviving something you didn't choose." They stood in silence, bound not by rope but something thinner and stronger, shared grief. The next days followed a rhythm. Eli never forced. He showed up, sat nearby, talked some, waited. When he did offer food, he did so from a distance. Diablo took it, but only after long minutes of deliberation. On the third day, Eli walked beside him in the paddock, not touching, just keeping pace. The horse allowed it. On the fifth, Diablo let Eli brush the dried mud from his flank. Each action was earned, never taken. The barn came alive again. Eli oiled old leather tack, mended broken fencing, res-tacked hay bales. His hands remembered their work, even if his body complained. Diablo watched everything, never far, never close. But each morning he'd be there, near the gate, waiting. By the second week, Eli decided it was time. He approached with a halter in hand. Diablo eyed it, snorted, and took one step back. Eli paused. "I won't trap you, but I will ask." He lowered the halter, holding it open. Diablo looked from the halter to Eli, then back again. His breath came faster. His hooves twitched, but he didn't bolt. After a long, tense moment, he stepped forward. Eli waited, and then, miraculously, Diablo slid his nose into the halter. Eli buckled it gently. "There we go. Easy." He stroked the stallion's neck, firm, confident but respectful. "We're getting there." They walked the paddock, the lead rope loose. Diablo responded to pressure, resisted at times, but never fought wildly. There were moments of challenge, head tossed, feet stomped, but they ended quickly. Trust didn't come in a flood. It came in drops. That night, Eli stood in the loft, watching the stars through a gap in the wall. The ache in his chest was deeper than the pain in his leg, but lighter than it had been in years. He hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. But that evening, he picked up an old satellite phone, dusted it off, and dialed a number he hadn't in a decade. A woman answered. "Clara, it's me." There was a long silence. "Eli," she said finally. "It's been a long time." "I know." He didn't offer excuses. He never had them. "I've been working with a horse. One that reminds me of everything." Clara's voice softened. "I heard about the auction. Folks have been talking." "I didn't plan it," he said. "Just happened." A pause. "I'm glad," she said. "You sound clearer." "Maybe I am." He looked out at the dark field, where Diablo moved like a ghost through the grass. "I think I'm going to try to ride him," Eli said quietly. "Not now, but soon." "You think he'll let you?" Eli smiled faintly. "I think we both want to stop running." They talked a while longer, about old things, not all of them painful. When he hung up, the stars were high and the night silent. The next morning, he saddled Diablo for the first time. It didn't go smoothly. The stallion tolerated the blanket, stomped at the sight of the saddle, and reared once when Eli tried to cinch it. But Eli didn't react. He just stepped back, waited, then tried again. By midday, the saddle sat secure. Eli didn't mount. Not yet. But Diablo wore it. That evening, as the light died behind the ridgeline, Eli sat on the barn's front step, rubbing his sore leg. Diablo stood nearby, head low, tail swishing lazily. He'd stopped flinching when Eli moved, stopped second-guessing every gesture. They weren't friends yet, but they were no longer strangers. As darkness crept in, Eli whispered, "Tomorrow." And Diablo didn't turn away. He just stood still, listening and waiting. The morning was still, the kind of stillness that came just before something significant. Mist curled low along the pasture, blurring the fence posts and wrapping the earth in silence. Eli stood beside Diablo, hand resting lightly on the stallion's withers. The saddle was already in place, cinched tight, blanket smooth. Diablo's muscles twitched beneath the weight, but he didn't resist. He hadn't tried to shake it off. That in itself was a kind of miracle. Eli breathed in the damp air, slow and deliberate. His bad leg ached more than usual, nerves buzzing with anticipation or dread. It was hard to tell which. He placed one hand on the horn, the other gripping the edge of the cantle, and hesitated. Diablo turned his head slightly, one eye locking on him. "I know," Eli murmured. "This is where things usually go wrong." The stallion didn't flinch. He didn't move at all. Eli pressed his boot into the stirrup, testing the shift of weight, and swung himself up. For a moment, it was as if the world held its breath. Diablo shivered beneath him, but didn't bolt. Eli settled gently into the saddle, keeping his hands low, his posture easy. Every instinct screamed to be ready, to grab the reins, to brace for a rear, a buck, something violent. But he didn't. He just sat, steady as the oak tree by the barn. Diablo danced a step to the side, his neck arched, ears flicking wildly. "Easy," Eli whispered. "You're all right." The stallion's breath came hard and fast, but he didn't explode. Instead, he took a step forward, then another, until they were moving, slow, uncertain, but moving. For 15 minutes they circled the paddock, nothing more than a quiet walk. Eli didn't ask for more. Not yet. He simply let the horse feel the weight of a man again, the rhythm of two hearts trying to beat together. By the time he dismounted, his shirt clung to him with sweat, not from fear, but from holding still, emotionally, physically, spiritually. He stroked Diablo's neck. "You did good, boy. Real good." And Diablo lowered his head in something that looked almost like agreement. Later that afternoon, a truck rumbled up the drive, a newer model, dust-covered but not beaten. Eli stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Clara emerged from the cab, boots crunching over the gravel, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She stopped a few feet from him. "You look thinner." "You look better than I remember." She raised an eyebrow, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Still a charmer. He looked down at the ground, chuckling. Not much practice these days. "Mind if I stay a while?" He stepped aside and gestured toward the barn. "It's not much, but it's home again." Inside, she set her bag on a hay bale and walked to the stall where Diablo now stood, eating with calm purpose. She studied him for a long time. "He doesn't look broken." "He isn't," Eli said. "That was the whole point." Clara turned to him, expression softening. "So what now?" "I ride him again tomorrow. Out of the paddock. Into open ground." "You sure he's ready?" He nodded slowly. "Not entirely, but we're close." She glanced toward the open loft above. "You sleeping up there again?" "Only place I ever really slept." She smiled faintly, then reached out, touched his arm. "You're different, Eli." "I hope so." They sat by the fire that night, small logs crackling as night fell around them. He told her about the first week with Diablo, about the silent understanding that had grown between them. She listened, not interrupting, her eyes reflecting the flames. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I never stopped wondering what happened to you. After Sam." Eli's throat tightened. "I didn't know who I was without him. Couldn't look at the place. Couldn't breathe. And now," he stared into the fire, "now I'm starting to remember who I used to be. Who I need to be." Outside, Diablo snorted softly, shifting in the night. By dawn, Eli had already saddled him again. Clara watched from the fence, arms crossed, silent but present. This time, Eli didn't stay in the paddock. He opened the gate, led Diablo through it, then climbed into the saddle with the same measured grace. The stallion tensed as they passed the fence line, nostrils flaring at the scent of freedom. But Eli kept his hand soft on the reins, his voice low and steady. They followed the old logging trail behind the barn, through the pines, where light filtered in golden shards and the ground was soft with needles. Birds darted above them, their songs weaving through the trees. Half a mile in, Diablo stopped, his ears locked on something distant, body vibrating with alertness. Eli sat still. "What is it?" A twig snapped. Then another. A family of deer bounded across the path, white tails flicking like signals. Diablo jerked his head, took a step sideways, but didn't bolt. Eli exhaled slowly. "Easy. You're all right." They stood together, still as statues, until the forest calmed. Then Diablo took a breath and moved forward on his own. That evening, Clara had dinner waiting. Nothing fancy, just stew, bread, and a jar of blackberry preserves that tasted of older, simpler times. They ate on the porch, watching the last light touch the tops of the trees. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe it's time you brought someone else in. Another horse. Someone to teach." Eli shook his head, not in refusal, but in reflection. "Maybe. But I'm not done with him yet." She nodded. "I know. But you've got more in you now. Not just grief." He looked out across the pasture, where Diablo rolled in the dust like a horse with no past. "You're right," he said. The following week, a storm rolled in, low thunder and a sky like bruised steel. Eli kept Diablo in the barn, but the energy crackled between them. The horse paced in his stall, restless, unpredictable. Eli stayed nearby, talking him through the worst of it, the way one might talk to a scared child. When lightning split the sky and the power flickered out, Eli lit a lantern and placed it near the stall. Diablo watched it, transfixed, as if the flame held answers neither of them had dared ask. "You don't have to be afraid," Eli whispered. "Not anymore." In the morning, the sky cleared. They rode again. Each day brought more confidence, more ease. And then, one afternoon, as the sun tipped low, Eli nudged Diablo into a lope across the open field. It was beautiful, smooth, balanced, alive. They weren't just rider and horse. They were one being, healed not by force but by trust. Clara stood at the fence, watching with tears she didn't bother to wipe away. When Eli brought Diablo to a stop, the stallion was breathing hard but calm, coat glistening with sweat. Eli slid down, walked him in a slow circle, then let him graze. Clara approached, voice trembling. "You did it." He looked at her, eyes full of something he hadn't shown in years. "Hope. I think he did more for me than I did for him." She reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his. "Maybe that's how it works. We save each other." Eli didn't answer. He didn't need to. The wind moved through the grass, like a whisper of the past easing into peace. That night, he wrote a letter to an old friend, to a vet in the city who took in rescues, who worked with kids, who once told Eli, "If you ever want to make a difference again, let me know." He sealed the envelope and set it by the door. Outside, Diablo whinnied once, as if calling him back to the field, and Eli smiled. Not everything broken had to stay that way. The wind had changed. It wasn't just in the air, but in everything. How Diablo moved, how Eli carried himself, how the farm breathed again. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a place haunted by silence and memories. It felt alive. Clara noticed it most in the mornings. Eli would already be outside when she stirred, the smell of coffee mixing with the scent of dew and hay. He no longer limped like a man crushed by grief. The pain was still there. She could see it in the way he rubbed his leg after long rides, but it didn't weigh him down. It sharpened him, gave him purpose. On one such morning, she found him by the east pasture, watching Diablo canter along the fence line. His silhouette cut sharply against the dawn sky, strong and familiar. "He's showing off," she said, walking up beside him. Eli didn't look away. "He knows he's beautiful now." Clara smiled. "So what happens when the world sees him?" He finally turned, eyes shaded beneath his hat. "Then the world better be ready." Later that day, Eli returned to the letter he'd been too hesitant to mail, the one addressed to Dr. Mendez, the old friend who'd once run a therapy program using rescued horses. The letter had sat on the kitchen shelf for a week, yellowed by sun through the window. Clara watched as he picked it up, smoothed the envelope's edge, then walked it to the mailbox at the end of the drive. He raised the flag. "I didn't think you'd actually send it," she said as he returned. "I didn't either," he replied. "But he's ready. And maybe so am I." The letter brought a reply faster than expected. A phone call 2 days later, then a visit by the end of the week. Dr. Mendez pulled into the driveway in a battered SUV, a long trailer hitched behind it. He stepped out of the car with the same calm intensity Eli remembered, weathered face, clear eyes, hands that moved like they were always listening. They embraced quietly, two men who didn't need to say much. "So this is the place," Mendez said, taking in the barn, the fence lines, the hills rolling behind them. "Hasn't changed much," Eli replied. "No," Mendez said, "but you have." They walked to the paddock where Diablo stood, grazing. The stallion lifted his head as they approached, ears pricking, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he watched, assessing, as he always did. Mendez took his time, moving in a slow arc, letting the horse see him, smell him, measure him. "Spirit like that," he murmured. "Can't be taught, only earned." "He's not perfect," Eli said. "He's still wary of sudden movement, doesn't take kindly to loud voices." "Neither do most people with a history," Mendez replied. They spent the day working slowly, Eli demonstrating, Mendez observing. They didn't push Diablo, didn't test him for the sake of proving something. They respected him, treated him as a partner. By sunset, Mendez leaned on the rail and nodded. "He's ready. More than that, he's needed." Eli's stomach tightened. Where would he go? "There's a boy," Mendez said. "Name's Leo. Lost his leg in a car accident. Withdrawn, angry. Won't speak to anyone. His parents don't know what to do with him anymore." Eli felt a familiar twist in his chest. "You think Diablo can reach him?" he asked. Mendez shrugged. "I don't know, but I think they might understand each other." That night, Eli sat on the porch long after the others had gone inside. Diablo stood by the far fence, barely visible in the moonlight. Clara brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him in silence. "They want to take him," he said eventually. "He'd be helping someone." "I know." She touched his hand. "But it hurts." He nodded. "Feels like giving up part of myself." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it's the part of you the world's been waiting for." 2 mornings later, the trailer was back. Mendez had brought a young boy with him, thin, pale, with a closed-off posture and a stare too old for his age. "Leo." Eli met him at the gate. "Morning." The boy didn't answer. "This is Diablo," Eli said, gesturing toward the stallion, who stood nearby, tail flicking lazily. "He's not much for talk either." Still, Leo said nothing, but his eyes didn't leave the horse. Mendez gave Eli a look that said, "Give it time." They let Leo observe. No pressure, no commands, just space. Diablo, to his credit, did the same. He watched the boy with curiosity, not suspicion. On the 3rd day, Leo held out an apple, palm flat like Eli had taught him. Diablo sniffed it, then took it gently from his hand. It was the first time Leo smiled. By the end of the week, he was brushing the horse, slow and unsure, but deliberate. He spoke to him in soft whispers, as though afraid the words might break if anyone else heard them. Eli watched from a distance, arms crossed. Clara stood beside him. "You did good." He shook his head. "They did good." When the day came for Diablo to leave, it felt like saying goodbye to a part of himself he hadn't realized was still alive. He led the stallion into the trailer slowly, speaking to him the whole way. Diablo followed without hesitation. Just before the door closed, Eli pressed his forehead against the horse's. "Be good," he whispered, "and be brave." The drive away was quiet. Clara held his hand the whole time. Back on the farm, Eli didn't rush to fill the empty stall. He left it open, swept clean, as if holding space for something sacred. But the world didn't wait. Word spread about the man who'd rehabilitated a horse no one could handle. Parents called. Veterans, Shelters. Rescues. People with broken animals and broken hearts. Eli said no to the first 10. Then a woman arrived with a mare named Junebug. Thin, wild-eyed, terrified of her own shadow. Clara watched Eli as he looked at the animal, his face unreadable. He walked slowly to the gate, stood there a long time. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out the same sugar cube he used to coax Diablo with, and held it out. Junebug didn't move at first. Then she stepped forward, trembling. Clara exhaled. "Looks like the stall won't stay empty long," she said. Eli smiled. "Guess not." The weeks that followed were quieter, but not slower. Junebug tested every inch of his patience. She spooked at leaves, reared at shadows, refused to eat from a bucket unless it was placed just right. But Eli didn't rush her. Each day, she came a little closer. Each night, he wrote letters, sometimes to Mendez, sometimes to Leo. The boy had started sending drawings, crude sketches of horses. The first one showed Diablo standing in a field. The second showed a boy beside him, holding the reins. Eli framed that one. On the 100th day since Diablo had left, a package arrived. Inside was a videotape and a short note. "He rides him now. Just walks, but it's something. Thought you'd like to see." Eli watched it twice. Then a third time. Leo sat straight in the saddle, one hand on the horn, the other resting gently against Diablo's neck. The stallion looked calm, safe, proud. When the screen went dark, Eli sat back, eyes wet. "He did it," he whispered. Clara leaned against the doorframe. They both did. Outside, Junebug whinnied, demanding attention. Eli rose, reaching for his hat. "There's work to do,"